Okay, so I think I'll get started and people can join as they can. So this evening we're going to be looking at the topic of moving through resistance. And moving through resistance that comes up when we begin to incorporate change into our life, or simply have the idea that we want to make some change. We can have the best intentions, we know that it's right for us, and yet we can come up against this. It might show itself as procrastination, it might show itself as us completely pulling away from something even though we know that it's right for us. We just suddenly get stuck despite us knowing that it's right for us. So this is what we're going to look at today. And the first thing that I should say is resistance is absolutely normal. It's absolutely normal. We are hardwired to resist change. Our amygdala, it interprets any change that we make as a threat to the body. And this can trigger the fight and flight response. It can trigger us to withdraw and begin to see any sort of change as a threat. Even though in our intellectual brain we know that absolutely it's the right thing for us. So, the right side of the brain lights up when we're avoiding something. This is also the region where where all of our negative emotions are processed. So we want to shift this activity. This is an activity of, we want to shape any kind of change that we're trying to create into the left side of the brain. The left side of the brain is the side of the brain where we approach things in our life with an openness and a resilience. So we want to start shifting from the right side of our brain to the left. Now these loops where we find ourselves up against challenge, we want to make change, we have best intentions of change, and then we get stuck again, and then nothing changes. These loops are so deeply and primally ingrained. It's no surprise that things like procrastination are so common when we start looking at these new but effective and important ways that we want to change our life. So our first step to moving through resistance here is that we must find realization and acceptance. We've got to really stare our current situation in the face. We've got to see and agree that if our current situation is not serving us, that a doing nothing approach or skirting around the situation approach simply is not going to cut the mustard. It's not going to address any of this substantial change that we want to make. Or not just substantial, but sustainable change. I'm sure many of us have gone about change in our life where we've gone full throttle, we're eating a certain way or exercising in a new way or whatever it might be, and we think, right, this is life from now on. I'm always going to live this way. And ever so slowly we start to creep back into our own way, our old ways, because actually we haven't worked with any of the mindset thing at all. The fear of change is still behind us, and once the novelty begins to wear off, then we're right back where we started again. So we can have our present situation. Our present situation isn't right for us. And we have a choice. We can ignore it and pretend it's not too bad. Be a bit disappointed with that situation, and we do nothing. This can help us, it can mean that we start feeling disempowered, powerlessness, and nothing changes. And what can happen in this loop is that our self-esteem begins to creep down. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And we remain stuck. However, we can take another route where we can see that our present situation is not for us. We lean into that discomfort. We really take a good look at it and ask why. Not only why are we in this situation in the first place, but why are we remaining here? We can begin to see patterns from the past reliving itself in our present that might be mirroring the situation that we're in right now. From this situation where we're looking it in the face, leaning into that discomfort, we can begin to see that a new approach is vital, like stuff has to change. And so despite us still being stuck in this situation presently, we're motivated and have opened ourselves up to the many options and paths that are open to us that we can take. It's in this mindset that we can see beyond our current situation. And we're thinking about moving forward, and thought fuels action. From there, we make empowered choices and decisions. We can see that things are a choice. And we can begin to see that even if we're not quite where we want to be, our mindset is very, very different. Our mindset is elevated. Our mindset is much vaster and more open, the left side of the brain. So, first step, when we start to come up against any resistance at all, or even before we come up against any resistance, as soon as we want to begin making any change, then we need to get clear. We need to get really clear. So begin to write down why it is that you want to make these changes. What is our 3 month, 6 month, 1 year, 3 year goal from now? Depending on that change you want to make, those timeframes will fit. Where will we be in our health, in our well-being, and in our goal? In that 3 month, 6 month, 1 year, 3 year. Why will bringing these changes into my life move me forward towards these goals? And very much in context with the course, why will bringing these particular practices and consistency of using these tools move you towards your goals? What emotion arises as you answer these questions? Does it make you feel a bit nervous, excited, relieved, resistant and sticky, or negative? And then notice where you feel those emotions in your body. So you might feel nervous in your stomach or in your center. You might feel negative and you feel that sensation here. We hold emotions in the body. So where do you feel your response, particularly any challenging responses to thinking about creating this change? And then the next big question, what happens if you don't do this? What happens if you don't do anything at all? What will be the repercussions if you just keep on like you have been up until this point? What then? And when you think about that, when you think about not doing anything at all, do any emotions arise as you think about that? And really feel into where you might feel those sensations in the body. Hi, Karen. No worries. You can always tune in later and get that first little chunk. Cool. So right now, is there any resistance to change? Is there any resistance to creating any change in your life? These are all really important questions to keep revisiting As soon as we begin to notice that change needs to happen, we begin to be drawn to a certain path. So in this case, maybe some parts and practices from this course, how you want to integrate it into your life. Is there any resistance to using these? Consistently carving out time to take care of yourself. Notice that resistance and notice the emotions that are attached to that resistance, and notice where you feel those emotions in the body. This is really helpful and really important when we start to really tune in to what's going on behind the scenes. So what does that resistance feel like? Where do you feel it in the body? What is its texture, its colour? The more we can identify and give it shape, the more we can catch it early. When we can catch it early, before we see that it's starting to steer the ship. And by that I mean we are faced with a change and we have all great intentions of that change. But then niggly Nancy at the back, that's kind of trying to keep us safe behind the scenes, begins to tell us, yeah, no, this isn't the right thing to do. Let's begin to back up. And our decisions begin to be informed by this subconscious story, this subconscious narrative that's going on behind the scenes, which is trying to keep us safe, but it's ultimately keeping us safe because it's scared of any change at all. So can we catch that voice before we start seeing that it's steering our decisions away from what we really want to do? When we feel that resistance arising, does it send you to a default activity? Eating when you're not hungry, for example, having a cigarette, giving yourself a hard time over something small, berating ourselves. Begin to notice. You notice this resistance. Where do you feel it in the body? Does it then make you want to self-soothe in some way? Begin to catch that loop, that path of activity that can again pull us away from where we're trying to get to. And we're not trying to repress this voice though, this resistance, this kind of fear-based voice at the back of our head that's resisting any change. We want to get to know it. We want to really get to see how much of the ship it's steering, and maybe even start to delve a little deeper into perhaps where its root is from. Very often the voice isn't ours at all. It's the voice of someone or a character that we were surrounded with when we were younger. So when we begin to breathe into that resistance, that discomfort, that resistance to making positive change, can we begin to notice what that voice is telling us? What's that inner critic saying? Now, yes, this will be sticky. Yes, this will feel uncomfortable potentially. But resistance and that inner critic has less impact every time we catch it. Each time we catch it, each time we hear him talking to us behind the scenes, trying to take over the ship and steer us in a different direction, back to something safe and stuck, shine a spotlight on it and begin to really see what it is that it's trying to tell us. Where is its root? Is there any truth in it? Now back to these questions. When we're thinking about this change, this positive change that we want to make in our life, a really important one to journal upon as well is, what impact will this have on my life? What impact will this have on my life and those around me? Now, I know we spoke about this in the course as well a lot. Self-care is not selfish. And when we make change and begin to feel the benefits of those changes, that has a ripple effect to those around us. That ripple effect just keeps on going. Not only can it impact our relationships, our interactions, but we might find that it will begin inspiring change in other people as well. And then a big important question to get clear on also is when we're approaching change, why is this important to me that I make this change? Like, really? Why is this important to me that it makes this change, that I make this change? And why is it important to do it now? And then finally, what might need to be let go of to enable me to fully embrace this and bring this into my life? So all of these questions are so important before we even feel that resistance moving in. This change, let's meet it with this inquiry. Now, to do this, to make change and meet the resistance and begin to understand it and move through it, or move with it, side by side with it, and enable it to lose some of its power on us. This work requires us to care about ourselves and how we feel on a daily basis. This is of utmost importance if we're beginning to really shift through this weighty, sticky resistance. So just like in the course, we talk about the importance of checking in throughout the day, checking into our bodily sensation and experience, how we're breathing, what feelings are arising, what chat is going on behind the scenes. How we're feeling as a check-in is so important. Asking ourselves regularly, how do I want to feel right now? And how do I feel right now? How we feel in any moment will impact the lens we see all of our life through and the experiences we find ourselves in. And it's important, right? If we're trying to create change and we're seeing things through a lens of, well, this isn't going to work anyway. I don't know why I even tried. As opposed to, imagine how I'm going to feel when I wake up tomorrow after doing this. If I have a good sleep, if I feel rested. It's a very different mindset and a very different lens we're seeing things through. So can we catch ourselves and notice more often those feelings that might be clouding our vision of how we're seeing everything around us? When we check in to how we feel regularly, it's easy to stop, correct, and get back on the path of least self-sabotage. So a question that I very, very often ask when I'm speaking to clients is, have you approached anything like this before? Why did you stop? How might you sabotage yourself in this? And so it's really helpful to understand and acknowledge perhaps where we might have sabotaged our efforts in the past, whatever it might have been for. If we can see all our feelings as a gift to help us stay on the path and catch ourselves when we're steering away from what we truly want, because the inner critic is trying to keep us safe and small. And again, this falls in the exact same pillar of mindfulness that we were exploring in the course. Can we invite in all the sensation in the body, the quality of the breath, the feelings that are arising, the inner critic, all of this stuff that is making up our experience in this very moment? Can we invite all of these elements in and see them as gifts, as helpful information that will help us to not only see our situation more clearly, but be able to increase our personal awareness, our self-awareness, our own rhythms. So we can use these pillars of mindfulness throughout our day to help us begin to catch ourselves before we sabotage our efforts. We can begin to gather information with as much curiosity and freshness as possible. Interesting. I'm feeling really, really resistant to this. I didn't even know that I felt that way. Interesting. There might be something that I need to pay attention to here. And so just like paying attention, just checking in with our breath, just as much as checking in with our body so that we can start becoming more alert and aware so that we can intercept the stress and anxiety symptoms, it's just as important to also be checking into our own emotional state at any given point throughout the day. And see what's going on, see what's there, see what's chattering behind the scenes. Now, no matter how committed we are to these practices and these check-ins, of course we are human beings, and so we will and should always experience the whole spectrum of feelings, because that's really important to our richness and experience of life. But when we are aware and present, we can notice and we can see our fears and understand our fears, understand the roots of them, and we can begin to see our problems and challenges on a day-to-day with a very different light and a very different resilience. Because by simply checking in and beginning to understand our emotional fluctuations and begin to see how our emotional fluctuations are creating different lenses in which we can perceive challenges and generally our day-to-day life, this will begin to increase our resilience tenfold. So these challenging emotions might not go away, but their control over us dissipates as we begin to see it very practically and begin to see too great and powerful at first. It's a good question. Well, it means that we, from a more preventative perspective, we need to start checking in a little more with our emotional well-being throughout our day, in the hope that we can begin to catch them a little earlier, so before they start to intensify into anger or something that feels a lot more overwhelming. And what I would say, if these feelings are too great and powerful at first, then we shift away from our focus from the emotions for a moment and we come back into our body. Come back to our meat and bones experience. What can we do to calm that down first? Because of course, when our emotions are too great and powerful already, then we're not going to have access to our prefrontal cortex, and therefore we're not going to be able to perceive the situation clearly. So if we're already that far along the line with our emotions when we check in, let's start by soothing the body first. Checking into this, breathing in, breathing down, and diaphragmatically. And after a few minutes of that, then check back in. Does that make sense? If not, we can completely dig this in a little bit deeper. But I would say, yeah, if emotions are becoming the intense experience that makes it feel overwhelming, yeah, great. Then come back to the body first. Come back to those check-ins that we did throughout the course. So a really important practice, no worries, a really important practice here, in addition to these regular check-ins, is to integrate a gratitude practice into our day. And that might be at the start or the end of our day, or both. Frame it if you can. Amazing. Because of course, if we're starting our day from this mindset, this left side of our brain mindset of gratitude, of being able to already come from this angle of seeing some richness and beauty in our life, then the way that we're going to then move throughout the rest of our day is going to be very, very different. So it's a great way to start, and it's a great way to end. So regular check-ins and a gratitude practice. So dealing with doubts. I mentioned this a little bit at the start. We start our new protocol, our new regime, or whatever we're trying to bring into our lives. And then we get overcome with doubt. Like, well, is this doing anything at all? Is this going to do anything? Should I do anything? Should I just stop before I start? Is this going to be a waste of time? Maybe it is. And then all of a sudden, this doubt overwhelms our incredible best intentions of creating this change. Because when that doubt floods in, it can be really challenging to know what we truly want. Because again, this doubt is coming from the amygdala going, oh, we don't like change. This change is scary. So we're going to shift you into the fight or flight right now. Because actually we're seeing this as a challenge and a threat. And it might be like a change, you want to cut out gluten, as an example. But our brain will still see, this is a change, I don't like this, let's flood you with doubt. Because this is scary and we don't want you to make change. So despite our best efforts to focus on what we want, sometimes we can still feel stuck and resistant. So, in this case, an option is to begin to divert our attention to something that is still healthy, that makes you feel good, but away from this particular focus for a moment. Away from this particular focus of, I don't know why I'm using cutting out gluten, but let's say, just moving away from this focus of cutting out gluten for a moment. But shifting our attention very much to another anchor point that's positive. So in that moment when we get flooded with, no, you definitely shouldn't cut this out. This is really bad for you. You're going to feel awful. Stop, stop, stop. But with this practice we were talking about earlier, then we can start to see, hello, okay, I see what's going on here. This is a change and it's feeling sticky and resistant and scary. So let's just park this for a moment and let's shift my attention to something else that's positive. So do you know what? Let's forget about cutting out gluten for a moment and I'm just going to take a walk. I'm going to take a walk outside and I'm going to breathe in the fresh air. Or I'm going to have a rest. Do you know what? I'm going to go and drink my tea and not look at a screen for 5 minutes at work. I'm going to go and take a jog. Anything that you can divert your attention to that is still on that positive shifting path. Catch that doubt and divert your attention for a moment. And then once you've had your 5 minutes of reading your book in quiet, uninterrupted, then you can come back to thinking and then reading up about how you need to cut out gluten again. Get on the phone to a friend that makes you laugh until we comes out. That's always my go-to. I've got one friend who will always, without fail, make me laugh so hard that my face hurts and a little bit of wee comes out. And then I can go about my day and rejoin this shift that I want to make in my life. Switch gears, stop the momentum of resistance and doubt-filled thoughts. Reset and come back to it later. Get back into the prefrontal cortex, get back into the rest and digest. You'll find your clarity and connection to, again, why you're doing this. All these questions that we talked about earlier, back to our why, back to why now, back to why it's important. It feels good to feel good. So when in doubt, when it starts to feel sticky, do something else that feels good for a moment. and then come back to it. Take the pressure off and come back when you're ready. So some guidance here as well is that I would say remove any barriers and make it as easy as possible for yourself. And by that, I mean, when you're trying to create change and we start to feel resistant and we start to feel like, oh, do you know what? I can't be bothered to get up 15 minutes early and do this yoga practice. I just can't be bothered. Well, the living room's busy. The living room's too messy right now, so I can't. So as an example of wanting to start a yoga practice, remove any barriers that could potentially stop you from doing your practice in the morning. So if you want to start practicing at home, diarise that time, have the space already cleared out before you go to bed the night before, and have all the equipment ready in one place. So when you get up in the morning, you have no excuse. Remove all of the potential excuses that could possibly come into your brain beforehand. This comes back to getting to know ourselves and our self-sabotage. What can we remove? What can we remove in terms of any excuse that we might pull out of the hat? You know, it's when we start to think about the ways that we have excused ourselves out of situations that were tricky that you go, oh, okay, these are some of the things that I really need to put into place. Or coming back to the gluten example, I need to cut out gluten, so I need to get gluten out the house. And that might mean that I have to buy the gluten-free cornflakes for the kids as well. But I've just got to remove any excuse that might stop me from moving a step forward on my path. So whatever change you're looking to bring into your day, particularly in context with this course, look through your day, scan through your day and think, right, where could I end up making excuses and not doing this? And just go ahead and remove as many of those potential excuses as possible. Make it as easy as possible for yourself to integrate this stuff. So if you want to start eating healthier, for example, you prepare your food in advance. You plan your meals for the week. You get rid of any food in the house that you think might pull you off the path. You order your food online so you're not tempted to stray and buy all this extra stuff you don't need. Tell anyone you live with that this is what you're going to do, or anyone that you work with if this is something that you might be bringing into your working day. Tell them why you're going to do it so you have some accountability. More often than not, they will respect your efforts. For example, if you have a housemate, they won't come back with a tub of ice cream if you're trying to cut out sugar, as an example. If you tell your partner that you want to start going to bed earlier, this is what I did with my partner, and very annoyingly but very helpfully, he will always say to me at 10 o'clock, right, you need to go to bed. You told me, you can't tell me off. I'm telling you that you need to go to bed if you want to stick to your plan, because you want to feel more rested in the morning, and blah, blah, blah. And he knows my whole process. He knows the whole reason that I'm doing it. He knows all of my whys and why it's important. And then he basically reads me it back. And in that moment, it can be really annoying, but do you know what? It works. Have some accountability. Never downplay your desire to make this change or start this change. This is important to you. If this is important to you, this goal has a why attached to it. So tell the person that you're trying to get to hold you accountable. Tell them this. I would like to start doing this X, Y, and Z because I want to feel X, Y, and Z. Because I want X, Y, and Z to stop. And doing this will move me towards a life freer, happier, healthier, whatever it is that your goal is. Never downplay this change. If it's important to you, then it is important, full stop. So, check in, reflect, celebrate, review. So when we start to make change, when I mentioned this earlier, well, I don't know if anyone has experienced this, where you have like a really good big burst of like, I don't know, going to the gym 3 times a week, and you're feeling great, and you're like eating well, and you're like, this is how it's going to be from now on. This is how life is going to be. I'm never going to fall off the wagon. But then we might do. And then all of a sudden we're kind of back where we started, and we're like, oh, that was really good for a while. Why did that stop? How did I fall off the wagon here? So to start, to intercept this before that happens, before we fully fall off the wagon, is to have check-ins. So when we're integrating a change, let's say, for example, a breathing practice that we want to start doing 3 times a day. And after a week, set a little bit of time aside and ask yourself these questions. Is this working for me? Can I develop on this now? Can I take it a little bit further? With the example of the breathing practice, maybe can I increase the breathing counts that I've been practicing? Can I develop on this now? Does the time that I'm doing this in the day, or the length of this, does this need to be reviewed, or is this working for me? Do I need some support? And that might be, again, accountability from a friend. That might be contacting your yoga teacher and having a chat with them about it. Where might that support be from? What have I noticed from doing this for the last 7 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, month? What have I noticed in myself, in my feelings, in my energy levels, in my ability to rationalize when my emotions become big and uncomfortable? Read back on your journal. Notice the words, notice the patterns, notice the narrative. Tune in regularly. If anything starts to feel like you're going through the motions, then revisit your values and your whys again. Why am I doing this? Why is it important? And with your answers to these questions and reflection on your whys, then you can ask, well, am I on the right track? If the answer is yes, then great. And each time you check in, say if you did the check-in every week to review, is this working for me, this new change? In a month's time, is this working for me? And then you get to a month, and then you celebrate the fact that you have done this for a month. Celebrate every little milestone where you continue to instigate this change. That you meet the resistance, that you lean into the discomfort, that you lean into the resistance and begin to know it and get to know it much better. Celebrate every milestone here. The more we celebrate our efforts as well, we celebrate our efforts as much as any impact or effect that we see these changes having on ourselves. Celebrate every time you can maintain any consistency of change. It's so important. And now a little bit on when the resistance is external. So when we make change in our life, particularly to support ourselves, we can sometimes come up against other people's judgments. They can make us feel like silly or bad. They can make us feel like we're just doing something a bit weird, a bit woo-woo. For example, if we're doing yoga and they don't really know anything about yoga, or they might make you feel guilty because this positive change, this time you carved out for yourself, is taking you away from where you might have been supporting them. more often than not, they will make you feel silly and bad because you making positive change has made them feel guilty of their own shortcomings, that they aren't helping themselves, that you're being independent of them, perhaps. Perhaps you're challenging the status quo, or culturally or attitudinally within your community or your family. They see your change as a threat, just like we see our own change as a threat. So how do we face this? It's important to stay strong and really connected to our whys in these situations, because if they can begin to make you feel guilty or silly or any of these feelings of kind of, no, we don't agree with what you're doing, stay connected to your whys, keep yourself as the priority, and remind yourself that whatever is coming up for them, clearly, if they're making you feel resistant and they're resistant to you creating positive change, you are not responsible for someone else's feelings, ever. You are not responsible for someone's feelings. So all you can do, stay connected to your whys and explain, if you want to get into a conversational narrative with them, if that's appropriate, explaining candidly, clearly, non-judgmentally about your whys and why this change is important and you're going to stick to it. So, for example, a client of mine a while back, she would get panic attacks every time she drove. And so she started carving out some time to practice yoga every evening. And there was some resistance to this because suddenly her partner was like, well, that means that we don't get to watch this telly together. And got a little bit crabby with her. Why can't you do it at a different time of day? Why can't you get up earlier and do it? And she couldn't. She got up so early for work, there was just no way. And he started to get a bit crappy about it. He started to make her feel a bit bad about it. And then she started to question why she was doing it at all. And whether it was actually that important that she made the change, whether she was important enough to make that change. But then she said to him, I'm not getting panic attacks and I can drive again. So this is working for me. Now, I hope you respect that I should continue doing something that enables me to gain my independence and my ability to drive again, to get my freedom back and get in control of these panic attacks that I've been having for ages. Can you respect this and understand this? And of course, then how can you argue with that? Usually people are resistant because they are experiencing something that they aren't addressing, that they are fully aware that there is something that they aren't addressing. So by being clear, firm in your resolve, and being truthful and vulnerable in your why and connected to your why, not only will it, in many cases, push them back and hopefully give them a bit of a light bulb moment as to what they're doing and how ridiculous it is that they're holding any resistance up towards this change anyway. It might just inspire them to start putting themselves first, investing some time into their needs, into those changes that they wanted to make. Because again, self-care is not selfish and it can inspire others to make the change too. Does all that kind of make sense at the moment? So for these last 5 minutes, I wanted to run through my tips to making change. Now, when we start thinking about making change, it can feel really, really overwhelming. So where do we start? Well, I would say first thing, hi Sarah, first off would be commit to 30 days. Now, 3 to 4 weeks is all the time you need to make a habit automatic, to begin to create those new neural pathways. If you can make it through the initial conditioning phase, this kind of sticky stage, it becomes much easier to sustain. A month is a good block of time to commit to consistency of something small, but in its consistency and its quality will become more and more effective and powerful. Make it daily. Consistency is critical if you want a habit to stick. Now, in some of the stuff that we explore in the course, we talk about doing this stuff 2-3 times a day, whether it's a breathing practice or a technique. Whatever it is you choose to do it at least once daily. If you want to start exercising, or go to the gym every day, even if it's just for like 20 minutes. If you want to start practicing yoga, don't start by trying to commit an hour a day downstairs and getting up at sunrise. Start with 15 minutes and do it every day, as opposed to 2 times a week or 3 times a week where it can get fit in. Consistency and daily after 30 days will really start to solidify that habit. Activities you do once every few days are much trickier to lock in as habits. And we talked about this in the course as well. Start simple. Don't try to completely overhaul and change your life in one day. It's easy to get over-motivated and take on too much. If you wanted to study 2 hours a day, first make the habit to go for 30 minutes and build on that. Remind yourself. Around 2 weeks into your commitment, it can be easy to forget. The novelty of creating change begins to wear off at about a fortnight. So place reminders wherever you can to execute your habit each day. If you miss your time, don't worry, but pick it up again. So start to think creatively about how you can find these little anchor points, these reminders throughout your day. So you can keep on reminding yourself. And if you miss any of those post-its dotted around your house, for example, then as soon as you remember, carve out some time, diarise it, and do it as soon as you can at the first opportunity. Get a buddy. Now, this is an interesting one, and it also kind of weaves into this getting some accountability, so talking to someone else about it. So, either getting a buddy might mean find someone who will go along with you, who will do this with you. Have a friend who will also do 15 minutes of yoga in the morning and check in with each other. How are you feeling today? How's it going? Or you have a friend or a colleague that you will go and take that 20-minute walk out in nature at lunchtime together. Get some fresh air. It's much more motivating, particularly on those days where it's a bit like, do you know what, I can't be bothered. If you have your mate turning up with her walking shoes and her woolly scarf on, going, right, are you ready for your walk in the park at lunch? Let's go. Let's do it. And suddenly, when you're feeling motivated and they're not, then you can be like, come on, we've got each other's back. Let's do this. And if you don't have someone who will actively do this with you, I know I've spoken to a few of you who you might be practicing with your partners a little bit as well. Have this chat. I know that probably at some point I will want to duck out. Will you make sure that you make me do this anyway? And I will do that for you on your day that you really want to, you don't want to do it. Deal. Shake on it. Have each other's back and hold each other accountable. Form a trigger. So this one, a trigger is like a ritual you use right before you execute your habit, your new habit that you're trying to integrate into your day. So, for example, if you wanted to wake up earlier every day, this could mean waking up in exactly the same way each morning. So, as a personal example, I get up an hour before my family does, and I usually do it every weekday, Monday through to Friday. And I come downstairs and I do it in exactly the same order until I roll out my mat and I'm on it. So I come into the kitchen, I turn the light on, I get the kettle on. While the kettle's boiling, I go for a wee. I come back, I put all my teas and my bits and pieces in my cups, and then I bring everything through into the living room where I do my practice. But it's this little ritual of making my tea and doing my thing, always in the same mug. I've got a little ritual to get me going. And then it just feels easier. And the more we do it, the more natural it becomes. So, can we form a bit of a ritual around it? A bit of a, yeah, almost like a dance step, a little dance routine to form, to frame around this trigger. And you can be pretty creative around this. And actually, I didn't even realize I was doing a ritual until this example in my head just popped up about my tea and my cups lined up in a certain way. It works. I didn't even have to think about it. And it creates this step by step, ingraining these new neural pathways more and more effortlessly. So think about, what is my little dance that I'm going to do around this? Now, if you are giving up on something in creating this new habit, let's say you're giving up sugar, make sure you are adequately replacing your needs, the needs that you've lost, in other ways. So actually, instead of sugar, let's think about, if watching television, you realise that you're watching telly loads, and that was your way of relaxing, you could take up meditation or reading as a way to replace that same need. If you use sugar as a way to give you a lift in the day, then can you replace it with moving your body at that point where you have that sugary lull, that 3 o'clock dip? Can you replace that need for that lift of energy with something else? Now, I love how so many of the pillars of mindfulness become so helpful, particularly when we're creating change and moving through resistance. Because this next one is being imperfect. Don't expect that all of your attempts to change habits to be successful will be successful immediately. You know, it can take 4 independent tries before you start exercising regularly. It's okay for things not to work. It's absolutely okay for things not to work. And it might take a few attempts. And every time the attempt, I don't want to say fails, but doesn't work out, can we be kind to ourselves? Can we be patient with ourselves? Can we be compassionate to ourselves? Can we learn from perhaps where we saw ourselves sabotage ourselves? Can we be resilient enough to try again in a different way? Can we come back to forming our little dance, our little ritual around our habit or change that we want to make? Can we do that in a different way? Allowing ourselves to be imperfect in this, allowing ourselves to be curious in this, and allowing ourselves to be really compassionate to ourselves when things don't quite work out. The practice, the technique, the way in which we integrated it into our life after a month is like, do you know what? This is not working for me. I can't weave this into my day. It's too tricky around work or blah, blah, blah. I think this needs to be reviewed. Allow this to be a work in progress. Allow ourselves to always be a work in progress, and allow ourselves to be imperfectly perfect or perfectly imperfect, whichever way round you want to say it. Can we allow ourselves to be works in progress and be okay and forgiving and patient with ourselves when things don't quite go to plan? Oh. So, removing temptation. We talked about this earlier, so I won't go on about it too much. But removing temptation, any excuse that might make us fall off the wagon in some way. So, for example, if you want to start practicing yoga in the evening, can you make sure that that space is clear for your yoga mat to be rolled out? So that when you have that time set and diarised, and you come to your space that you want to do your yoga practice and it's not full of laundry. Or in my case, I came down this morning and my yoga mat was covered in Sylvanian families. You know? Can we do a little bit of prep work? If we're trying to go gluten-free, can we get rid of the gluten-filled cereal and get gluten-free stuff in the cupboard? Can we remove any temptation to fall back into our old safe ways where nothing changes? Cool. Now, the final one that I wanted to say is remember to do it for yourself. Now, I know we talked about self-care is not selfish. It has a ripple effect. This can be a great motivation. But can we do it for ourselves? Can we remind ourselves over and over again that this is important to us? Don't worry about all the things you should have as habits. Don't worry about all the shoulds, that you should have done earlier. I should have done this earlier. I should have done this. I should have done that. Instead, can you remember how important it is that you're doing it for yourself now? Lay yourself a good, firm foundation to ensure that there is the least opportunity for resistance from yourself, resistance from others, removing temptation to fall into old rhythms because it feels safe. And can we remember that resistance is hard, change is hard, and we are wired for change to be hard. So on those days when it's challenging, remember this is not you being in some way not good enough or not resilient enough or not strong enough. Remind yourself that we are hardwired to not want to change. And so this isn't going to be easy. And this might be trial and error. And this might require some energy and quite a lot of headspace and a lot of trying and reviewing and checking in and having to try a few different things until we find what works for us. But this isn't supposed to be easy. but it will be worth it. So, with all of that in mind, how did all that kind of land with you guys? Did it make sense? I ramble a little bit and I'm a bit tired, but I hope I didn't ramble too much. Do you have any questions or thoughts or something that just didn't quite sit well with you? Cool. So, we went over by a minute. That's not bad. So if there are any, no worries, no worries. So see how this all lands for you. And if anything comes up for you, any questions, or you want me to kind of revisit any of this stuff later on, just let me know. I will keep this Facebook group open for a few more weeks. Then I really invite you to come and join me over in the yoga for stress, anxiety and wellbeing group. That's my main group, and many people who take part in these stress and anxiety courses end up joining that once their courses are done. In this group, I keep you up to date with things that are going on. You get exclusive discounts on stuff that's coming up. But also you get free practices regularly from me, if not weekly from me. So recordings and bits and pieces that you can use as you go. And it's a way to just keep on checking in with me, you know, touch in with me here and there as and when you ever need any support or have any questions. And you can begin to see how the community is growing, because that group initially was set up for people simply who were taking part in the courses to then begin to build this community, begin to build this more kind of open narrative about talking about stress, anxiety and well-being in everyday life, and being quite candid and normalized around the challenges that come up. So I really kind of urge people to use it as a platform to do so. And yeah, hopefully you'll come and join me on there. But I'll keep this open for a few more weeks, and I'll see if I can somehow transfer this into that group as well. So if you ever want to watch that again after this group's closed, I'll see if there's a way that I can save it. But yeah, until then, if you don't have any other questions, have a lovely sleep now. I'm going to go pile into bed in a moment. And yeah, keep in touch. And yeah, hopefully see you guys soon. Have a lovely rest of your week.